Ever get a craving for those golden arches? You know, that smell of fries and burgers in the air?
Classic.
Well, today we're taking a deep dive into the story behind McDonald's
Oh, wow.
and its surprising connection to black capitalism in America.
I think a lot of people might think of fast food as just, burgers and shakes.
Right.
But we're going to uncover how McDonald's became intertwined with, the pursuit of racial equality and economic empowerment, especially after the Civil Rights Movement.
Yeah, we're going to go way beyond just the Big Mac. We're going to be
Yeah.
using the Code Switch episode called Black Capitalism and McDonald's with historian Marcia Chatelain.
And she really, she know her stuff.
Yeah.
She wrote the book on it, literally.
Literally wrote the book Franchise, The Golden Arches in Black America.
They're ready for some aha moments.
Yeah.
As we explore how a fast food giant became a symbol of opportunity, but also sometimes unfulfilled promises
Right.
for Black communities in America.
To really get this, we need to rewind back to the years after the Civil Rights Movement. Imagine like all those societal shifts,
Uh-huh.
the growing pains of a nation really dealing with racial inequality,
Yeah.
and the rise of fast food is like a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah,
It was during this time that the idea of black capitalism kind of took root.
exactly.
Right.
The idea that economic power could be like a route
Yeah.
to racial equality gained a lot of traction.
Yeah.
And Black capitalism advocated for Black ownership, entrepreneurship, and community investment
Yeah.
as a way to kind of get over these systemic barriers.
Overcome them, yeah.
Yeah.
But as we're going to see, the path was definitely not smooth.
No.
Early on, McDonald's had a very specific audience they were going for.
Yeah.
White suburban families.
Yeah.
Their marketing and where they put their restaurants reflected that.
It's important to remember that, even though McDonald's has this image of like being this all-American brand, it was
Right.
initially really just going for a specific part of society.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But 1968 changed everything. The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. led to riots,
Yeah.
civil unrest that just swept through cities across America.
Huge turning point.
Yeah, and this really forced businesses,
Yeah.
including McDonald's,
Yeah.
to kind of rethink their strategies.
Yeah. Those riots really changed things. They
Mhm.
led to like big demographic shifts in cities.
Uh-huh.
And, you had white flight leaving this kind of void.
Right.
And that created both challenges and opportunities for businesses like McDonald's.
And that's where things get interesting.
Yeah.
Both McDonald's and black communities
Right.
kind of saw an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
in this changing landscape.
Yeah.
McDonald's saw like this untapped market.
Huge market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And black entrepreneurs saw franchising as a way to kind of gain some economic power.
Yeah. It's a really cool example
Yeah.
of how like a big corporation and a group that's been marginalized,
Yeah.
each with their own goals,
Yeah.
could kind of come together on this shared opportunity,
Right.
even though they had very different reasons.
Yeah. So let's talk about the first black-owned McDonald's in Chicago.
Okay.
It really quickly became more than just a place to get a burger.
Oh,
It became like a crucial community hub.
absolutely.
Yeah.
These early Black-owned McDonald's were like symbols of success and pride
Yeah.
and places for the community to get together.
Uh-huh.
They had voter registration drives, job fairs,
Wow.
even showcased Black history and art.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really a testament to the hopes and vision
Yeah.
that was driving Black capitalism.
It's amazing to think that a fast food restaurant could be such an important part of community life.
I know, it's pretty cool.
It really shows that desire for economic self-sufficiency
Yeah,
and advancement
totally.
that was at the heart of black capitalism.
That's the promise of Black capitalism.
Right.
But it's important to remember that there's a paradox
Okay.
built into this whole ideology. While it was aiming for racial equality through economic means,
No.
it was also relying on a system, capitalism, that had a history of putting Black communities at a disadvantage.
So you're saying there's this tension built into the very idea
Totally.
of black capitalism.
Yeah,
Can you really achieve equality
right.
in a system that might be biased against you?
Exactly. That tension is at the core of the debate about Black capitalism. Can you really get equality by playing by the rules of a game that might be rigged?
Right.
And this is where Richard Nixon comes into the story.
Wait, Nixon.
Yeah.
This same Richard Nixon who wasn't really known for being progressive on race relations.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Nixon wasn't exactly a champion for civil rights,
Right.
But he saw black capitalism as a way to kind of deal with the demands for racial justice,
Okay.
but without needing the government to do a lot.
Also, it was like a convenient solution for him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a market-based solution that fit with his own agenda.
So it was black capitalism, but on his terms.
Right.
And without really addressing the systemic inequalities that were at the heart of the problem.
Exactly. It was more about how things looked
Right.
and keeping the power structures as they were than actually creating real change.
And it's important to remember this focus on black capitalism wasn't just about McDonald's.
Oh, no. It was a much bigger movement
Okay.
across all kinds of industries.
Yeah.
You had people like Muhammad Ali endorsing Burger,
What?
and even the gospel legend Mahalia Jackson
Oh,
putting her name on a fried chicken franchise.
really?
Black ownership was becoming a real force in American business.
Yeah, it was about taking control,
Yeah.
building businesses,
Huh?
representing black excellence in the market.
Yeah.
But as we move through the decades, the story of black capitalism
Yeah.
and how it relates to fast food
Yeah.
takes some unexpected turn.
It does.
Yeah.
And as we explore those turns, we'll see how that early optimism about black capitalism
Yeah.
hit some hard realities,
Okay.
especially in the fast food world.
All right, so let's dive into those realities,
Huh?
starting with those iconic McDonald's commercials
Okay.
featuring Calvin,
Yeah.
this young black man who rises through the ranks to become a manager.
Those commercials are like a window into how McDonald's presented itself to black communities in the 90s.
Okay.
And they're a really interesting example of how marketing can both reflect and shape how people see things.
So let's unpack those Calvin commercials
Okay.
and see what they tell us about the changing image and impact of black capitalism,
Yeah.
especially as it played out in the fast food world.
Absolutely. Man, those Calvin commercials were everywhere in the 90s. You couldn't escape them.
Yeah.
Really pushing that idea that McDonald's was like a place where young black people could, move up and make a future.
They definitely stuck with you.
Yeah.
It wasn't even about the food anymore.
Yeah.
It was all about aspiration, like rising above where you came from.
Yeah. It was this whole story about,
Yeah.
upward mobility, getting out of dead-end jobs and finding something better.
And I bet for a lot of people,
Yeah.
especially in communities where opportunities felt limited,
Right.
that message really hit home.
Yeah, it was like McDonald's saying,
Yeah.
hey, we see you, we value you,
Right.
and we can give you a shot to succeed.
Yeah, but there's a deeper layer here that I think those commercials didn't really show.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot going on under the surface.
Right.
While those commercials were playing,
Yeah.
the reality of owning a McDonald's, especially in black neighborhoods, was getting tougher.
So you have this image of Calvin moving up,
Right.
but at the same time, actually owning a McDonald's was becoming harder.
Exactly. By the 90s, the fast food market was totally packed.
Wow.
Competition was intense.
Yeah.
Profits were shrinking. And the cost of buying a franchise had gone way up.
So it sounds like that whole idea of black economic empowerment through owning a franchise
Right.
was getting further and further out of reach,
Yeah.
even as McDonald's was showing this image of opportunity.
It shows a really important point.
Yeah.
Just relying on individual entrepreneurship to fix deep-rooted problems.
Right.
Like the racial wealth gap, it just doesn't work.
Doesn't work, yeah.
Black families, because of historical and ongoing discrimination, they just didn't have the same access to money as white families.
So the playing field wasn't even level.
No, not at all.
Let's start with. And those commercials are saying like hard work and determination is enough.
Yeah, but that's just not the whole story.
But it's not that simple.
Right, it's a big critique of black capitalism.
Okay.
Did it really change things for the better?
Yeah.
Or did it just make a system that was already unfair a little bit more inclusive?
And we have to remember, for most McDonald's workers,
Right.
those jobs were still low wage,
Yeah.
not great benefits,
Uh-huh.
and often tough working conditions.
It's a big disconnect between that aspirational image
Yeah.
that McDonald's was showing and what it was actually like to work there.
Yeah, for a lot of black employees, those commercials weren't telling the whole story.
Exactly. Those Calvin commercials,
Uh-huh.
they kind of both reflected and hid the complexities of black capitalism.
Yeah.
They highlighted these individual success stories,
Right.
but they didn't really show the systemic barriers
Right.
that made success so hard for many people.
So it sounds like representation, even though it's important,
Yeah.
it's not enough on its own.
No.
It's not just about seeing a black face in a commercial.
Right.
It's about actually changing the systems
Exactly.
that create and maintain inequality.
That brings us to a really big question.
Yes.
What's the legacy of Black capitalism today?
That's a big one.
Is it a real path to economic power?
Yeah.
Or does it just prop up a system that only helps a few people while leaving others behind?
This has been debated for decades.
Yeah.
And it feels even more relevant now.
Yeah.
With everything going on with racial justice and economic inequality.
Absolutely.
Going back to the Code Switch episode,
Mm-hmm.
Marcia Chatelain makes a really interesting point
Yeah.
about what happened after the 1968 riots.
She talks about how after those riots,
Yeah.
there was this push for big changes, like police reform, better housing quality education. But instead of actually tackling those issues,
Yeah.
the focus shifted to things like small business loans and empowerment zones.
So it's like saying, if we just have more Black-owned businesses,
Yeah.
the problems of racial inequality will kind of fix themselves.
That's the idea, but it's just too simple.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really work.
Right.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
Right.
It might look better on the surface,
Yeah.
but it doesn't fix the real problem.
And Chatelain says this is still happening today.
Yeah.
After George Floyd was murdered.
Uh-huh.
A lot of companies said they would support Black businesses and creators,
Right.
which is great. But those actions often don't really address
Right.
the systemic problems
Yeah.
that caused those protests in the first place.
It's like we're stuck
Yeah.
responding to calls for racial justice with market-based solutions instead of dealing with the real issues like racial bias discrimination and the history of oppression.
So it brings up this fundamental question.
Yeah.
Can capitalism, even with good intentions, really be a way to achieve racial justice?
It's a big question.
Or does it just keep the inequalities going?
Yeah.
It's a really deep question.
Yeah.
And it makes us think hard
Uh-huh.
about how we approach race and economic empowerment.
Totally. And as we dig deeper into this,
Yeah.
I think it's important to shift our focus
Okay.
away from like boardrooms and marketing and really look at what it was like
Yeah.
for the people working in those McDonald's,
Right.
especially in Black communities.
It's about understanding
Yeah.
that behind all the big corporations,
Mm-hmm.
the big brands, there are real people
Right.
whose lives are affected by the decisions made at the top.
And their stories,
Yeah.
especially the ones you don't see in commercials.
Right.
Those are the ones that really tell us what's going on.
So we've been talking about Calvin and those McDonald's commercials, showing this idea of, moving up in the world.
Right.
But what was it really like for the people working in those McDonald's, especially in Black neighborhoods?
Well, for a lot of them,
Yeah.
those jobs were never going to make them rich or even really secure.
Right.
They were low-paying jobs,
Uh-huh.
not many benefits, and the hours could be all over the place.
So there was this disconnect between that dream of owning a franchise
Right.
and the reality of just trying to survive on a fast food paycheck.
Yeah, that gap between what people hoped for
Right.
and what was actually happening.
Yeah.
That gets to the core of what people criticize about Black capitalism.
Okay.
Did it really help community? Or did it just make it seem like things were getting better when the system itself was still messed up?
And that's where things get really tough to think about.
It is.
Even
Yeah.
just taking part in a system
Yeah.
can sometimes feel like you're part of the problem.
It's a hard question
Yeah.
with no easy answers.
Right.
On the one hand, supporting Black-owned businesses, even within a big company like McDonald's,
Yeah.
can be a way to empower people economically.
It's about keeping money in the community,
Right.
creating jobs,
Yeah.
showing what Black entrepreneurs can do.
Exactly.
But then there's also the argument that this whole approach
Yeah.
can actually distract from the bigger problems.
Right.
Like it might make it seem like things are getting better
Uh-huh.
without really changing the root causes of inequality. So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
How do we help Black communities
Right.
without getting trapped in a system that hasn't always had their best interests at heart?
Man, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
I don't think there's one right answer.
Yeah.
It's about understanding how complicated things are,
Okay.
not falling for easy solutions,
Right.
and most importantly, listening to what people in Black communities are saying.
Because there isn't just one Black experience, is there?
No, there are so many different perspectives.
Yeah.
Different needs, different ways of doing things.
Economic empowerment is just one part of it.
Right.
We also need to deal with things like education,
Yeah.
healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
housing, criminal justice reform.
All of that.
All these things are connected,
They are.
and they contribute to the inequalities we see.
It seems like to really get to equality.
Yeah.
We need to do a lot of things. We need to address what we see on the surface and the underlying causes of racism in the system.
So what's the main takeaway for our listeners today?
Okay.
What do we want them to walk away thinking about?
I think the big thing to remember is that the history of Black capitalism, even in something as familiar as McDonald's, is way more complicated than it might seem. It's a story of ambition and struggle, hope and disappointment. And it reminds us that there are no easy answers when it comes to dealing with racial and economic inequality.
It's a story that makes us think critically about the systems we're a part of. To see both the good and the bad in market-based solutions. And to always listen to the people who are most affected by these issues.
Exactly. As we keep having these tough conversations, we got to remember that real progress takes more than just good intentions.
Absolutely.
It means being willing to take apart the things that keep inequality going and build something truly fair in their place.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with a question to think about. What do you think the role of Black capitalism is in the world today? Is it a positive force, a distraction, or somewhere in between? Let us know your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives that go beyond the headlines and into the heart of what matters. Thanks for listening.